Imagine this, after years of sacrifice, saving every penny, and building a life together, you wake up one day to find it all gone. Not just the money, but your home, your sense of security, and even your family. That's exactly what happened to me. My husband, a man I trusted with my life, did the unthinkable. He took every cent of our $500,000 family savings, kicked me out of our house without a second thought, and left me stranded in the cold. It felt like my world had crumbled in an instant. But that wasn't even the worst part. The next day, something so shocking happened that it turned the entire situation upside down. Something my husband never saw coming. What would you do if everything you ever worked for was stolen from you by the person who was supposed to protect you? How do you rebuild when the rug has been pulled out from under you? And what do you do when the person who wronged you faces consequences they never expected? Stay with me, because what happened next will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story of unexpected twists, karma, and a revenge that no one saw coming. You're not going to want to miss this. Let me take you back to a time when life seemed almost perfect. I had a good life, at least, I thought I did. My name is, wife's name, and for the better part of 15 years, I devoted myself to my marriage and building a future with my husband. We weren't rich by any means, but we were careful. Every paycheck, every bonus, every little bit we could save went into what we called our nest egg, our safety net for the future. Together, we had managed to save $500,000. It wasn't easy. I remember skipping vacations, choosing to cook at home instead of eating out, and even cutting back on things we wanted just to ensure that our savings grew. It was hard work, but it felt worth it because we had a goal in mind, a home of our own, a secure retirement, maybe even starting a small business. That money represented years of sacrifices, sleepless nights worrying about bills, and dreams for a better future. But in the months leading up to the betrayal, I noticed a change in my husband. At first, I thought it was just stress, maybe work was getting to him, or he was going through something he didn't want to talk about. He became distant, more secretive, staying out late and making excuses for missing family dinners. He brushed off my concerns with half-hearted explanations, and I, wanting to believe the best, gave him the benefit of the doubt. I never imagined that behind his coldness was something far more sinister. He wasn't just hiding something from me, he was plotting a move that would turn my world upside down. Little did I know that the man I had built my life with, the man I trusted with everything, had other plans for our hard-earned savings. And as I would soon discover, those plans did not include me. What happened next is something that no one could have predicted, but it changed everything. The day everything fell apart started just like any other. I came home from running errands, groceries in hand, expecting to have a quiet evening. But as soon as I walked through the front door, I sensed something was off. My husband, who normally avoided eye contact these days, was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly ahead. His hands were clasped tightly, his knuckles white. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and I could feel my heart start to race. I cautiously asked him what was wrong, and that's when he said the words that knocked the wind out of me. "I've taken the money. All of it." At first, I didn't even understand what he meant. Taken what money? My mind was scrambling to make sense of his words. But then he continued, each word more cutting than the last. "The $500,000 in our savings. It's gone, and so are you. I want you out of this house." The ground beneath me seemed to disappear. How could this be happening? The man I had spent years trusting, the man I had sacrificed so much for, had just taken everything we had built together, and without a shred of remorse. My head was spinning, my heart pounding in my chest. The disbelief hit me first, like a punch to the gut. How could he do this? After everything we had been through, how could he betray me like this? I remember standing there, rooted to the spot, my hands trembling, trying to grasp what he was saying. The $500,000, it was everything to us. It wasn't just money, it was our future. We had worked so hard for it, penny by penny, making sacrifices, planning our lives around that fund. And now it was gone, just like that. I begged him for an explanation, but he cut me off coldly. "It's over. I've made up my mind. You're leaving tonight. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I felt my legs go weak as the reality of his words sank in. I had no idea where I would go or what I would do. My mind raced through a million possibilities, but none of them seemed real. Everything was slipping away from me, my home, my money, my stability. This was my life, and in the blink of an eye, it was all crumbling down around me. My emotions swung wildly between anger and heartbreak. I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he was doing this, but at the same time, I was too devastated to speak. The man I thought I knew, the man I had trusted with my life, had turned into a stranger in an instant. I felt utterly betrayed, a deep ache forming in the pit of my stomach that wouldn't go away. But there was no time to process it. He wanted me gone that very night. With no plan, no time to think, I found myself packing a bag, tears streaming down my face, my mind numb from shock. As I grabbed whatever I could in those few frantic minutes, I wondered if this was real or just some awful nightmare I'd wake up from. But it wasn't. This was happening, and I was completely powerless. That night, I walked out of the home I had poured my heart and soul into. I had no place to go, no one to turn to. Most of my family was far away, and I couldn't bear the thought of explaining what had just happened. The shame, the humiliation, it was overwhelming. So I got into my car and drove, with no destination in mind, just trying to escape the suffocating pain. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The room was cold and dimly lit, the walls closing in on me as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my packed bag. I felt completely and utterly alone. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I had lost everything in the span of a few hours. My home, my financial security, my husband, it was all gone. I felt devastated, but the worst part was the uncertainty. What was I going to do now? I had no plan, no clear path forward. The savings were gone, my credit cards were maxed out from months of relying on them to keep up with bills, and I had nowhere to go. The fear was paralyzing. Every dream I had for our future together was now shattered, and I couldn't even see a way out of this nightmare. In the following days, I struggled to make sense of it all. I called a few friends, but I felt too embarrassed to tell them the full story. Who would understand? It felt like I had been blindsided, thrown into a pit of despair with no way to climb out. I was lost, emotionally, financially, and mentally. How could I have let this happen? How could I have missed the signs that my husband had changed so drastically? But as painful as it was, this wasn't the end. I was determined not to let him destroy me completely. I still had fight left in me, even if I didn't know where to start. And little did I know, something was coming that would shift the course of my life in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. The next day brought an unexpected twist that would turn the tables on everything I thought I knew. The days that followed my abrupt departure from my home were some of the hardest I had ever faced. But amid the heartache and confusion, I slowly began to find my footing. The first step was acknowledging my pain. I had spent too long trying to convince myself that everything would be okay, but now I understood that facing the reality of my situation was crucial for my healing. I reached out to my sister, who lived a few hours away. When I finally shared my story, the compassion in her voice was a balm to my wounded spirit. She urged me to come stay with her for a while. "You can't be alone right now," she insisted. "We'll figure this out together." Her offer was a lifeline, and I accepted it without hesitation. As I packed my few belongings, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Leaving the motel and heading to my sister's home felt like shedding a heavy layer of despair. I arrived late in the evening, and as soon as I stepped through the door, my sister wrapped her arms around me. The warmth of her embrace was a reminder that I was not completely alone in this world. Living with her provided me with a semblance of stability. We spent hours talking, and I poured out my heart. She listened without judgment, allowing me to share my fears, anger, and sadness. Little by little, I started to feel the shadows of despair lift, even if just a little. My sister encouraged me to focus on my recovery, to reclaim my sense of self that had been so easily overshadowed by my husband's betrayal. But as I began to heal, I also started thinking about the future. I couldn't let this betrayal define me. I needed to take control of my life and reclaim what was rightfully mine. That's when I realized I needed professional help to navigate this complex situation. My sister suggested consulting a lawyer to understand my rights and explore my options. The lawyer's office was cold and sterile, filled with the lingering scent of coffee and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. I sat nervously across from a woman who exuded confidence and competence. After I told her my story, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a moment. "You have rights," she said matter-of-factly. "Half of the assets are legally yours, including that $500,000. Her words ignited a flicker of hope within me. We discussed my husband's financial behavior, and that's when I learned about the legal implications of his actions. My lawyer explained that his reckless gambling and financial habits might not only impact our marriage, but could also have serious consequences for him in the long run. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but knowing that I wasn't completely powerless gave me a renewed sense of strength. As we began to delve deeper into my husband's finances, I learned that my husband's gambling addiction was worse than I had initially thought. My lawyer uncovered details about unpaid loans and mounting debts that left me in shock. I had been so focused on my own devastation that I hadn't considered the full extent of his financial troubles. It was becoming increasingly clear that my husband was spiraling out of control. While my husband was living a life of reckless abandon, I was working diligently to build a new path for myself. I began gathering all the necessary documents, bank statements, and evidence of our shared assets. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how significant his financial mismanagement had become. One evening, as I sat at my sister's dining table poring over paperwork, I stumbled upon a series of notifications regarding missed payments. It appeared he had been skirting responsibilities for months, using our savings to fuel his gambling addiction instead of investing in our future. I felt a mix of anger and pity. He had thrown away not only our money but also the dreams we had built together. Each revelation only fueled my determination to reclaim what was mine. My lawyer and I devised a plan. It was time to confront my husband, but this time, I would do it with the knowledge and legal backing I had gained. Armed with the understanding that I had rights and that the money he had taken was not just his to squander, I felt a sense of empowerment that had been missing for so long. Weeks passed, and I began to notice changes in my husband's behavior after kicking me out. He was no longer the confident man I had once known. His arrogance had been replaced by anxiety and desperation. I learned through mutual friends that he had started avoiding our social circles and spending more time alone. It was as if he knew the consequences of his actions were catching up with him. One night, I received a call from a friend who had witnessed my husband at a local bar. He had been arguing with someone over a large gambling debt, and it didn't take long for the situation to escalate. My heart sank as I realized he was drowning in his mistakes, and the reality of his life was beginning to reflect the chaos he had inflicted on mine. The more I learned, the more resolved I became. I knew that his actions were not just a betrayal of trust, but also a betrayal of our shared dreams. He had placed our future at risk for a fleeting thrill, and I was determined to hold him accountable. It wasn't just about reclaiming my money, it was about standing up for myself and taking back my power. In the coming weeks, as I continued my recovery, I also prepared to confront him. With each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. I realized that I deserved to be treated with respect and that I could no longer allow him to dictate my life. It was time to face him, to stand my ground, and to show him that I would no longer be his victim. As the day of our confrontation approached, I felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. I had been preparing myself mentally, rehearsing what I would say and how I would present my case. I could already envision the look on his face when I laid out the evidence of his financial irresponsibility and reminded him of the consequences he would face for his actions. This was no longer just about a betrayal, it was about reclaiming my life and my future. I was no longer the woman who had been blindsided by his deceit. I was now a woman determined to fight back and prove that I was stronger than he had ever imagined. The time for action was drawing near, and I was ready to show him the strength I had found in my darkest moments. It was a chilly afternoon when I received the call that would change everything. My phone buzzed, and as I glanced at the screen, my heart sank. It was him. I had spent weeks trying to distance myself from the chaos of our past, but now he was reaching out. For a moment, I hesitated, battling the familiar wave of anxiety that washed over me. What could he possibly want? I picked up the phone, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice shaky, almost pleading. There was an unfamiliar vulnerability in his tone that I hadn't heard in years. "I need your help." Every part of me wanted to reject him immediately, to hang up and never look back. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the curiosity about his desperation or the chance to finally confront him face to face. "Where do you want to meet?" I replied, keeping my tone steady. He suggested a coffee shop downtown, a place we used to frequent. I agreed, but with every passing minute leading up to our meeting, my stomach churned with apprehension. As I arrived, I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me, but I was determined to stand firm. When I walked into the coffee shop, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, nervously fidgeting with his hands. He looked different, haggard, older, and more defeated than I had ever seen him. My heart ached at the sight of him, but I quickly reminded myself that I couldn't afford to feel sorry for him. I was here to confront the man who had torn my life apart. "Thanks for coming," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I didn't know if you would." "Honestly, neither did I," I replied, taking a seat opposite him. I could see the tension radiating from his body as he avoided my gaze. "So, what do you need?" He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I messed up, okay? I lost everything, our money, my dignity, my friends. I didn't think it would come to this." His voice cracked, and for a moment, I almost felt a pang of sympathy. But I quickly pushed it aside. "I didn't think it would come to this either, but here we are," I responded coldly. "You kicked me out of my own home, took our savings, and threw away our future. What do you expect me to do now?" He looked up at me, desperation etched on his face. "I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But I'm asking you to help me. I can't do this alone. I need you back in my life. Please." The words hung heavy in the air between us. This was the moment I had envisioned, the confrontation I had prepared for. I could feel the power shifting, and for the first time, I realized I was no longer the victim. I was in control, stronger and wiser than I had ever been. "No," I replied firmly, my voice steady. "You don't get to just waltz back into my life because things got tough for you. I've spent the last few weeks rebuilding my life after you shattered it. I can't go back to that." His expression shifted, frustration and anger mingling with desperation. "But what about us? We built a life together. Don't you remember the good times? We can fix this, can't we?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words wash over me. "Yes, We had good times, but those memories were now tainted by the betrayal and pain he had inflicted. You've shown me who you really are, and I can't ignore that. I refuse to return to a toxic relationship. I deserve better. He fell silent, the fight leaving him as he sank back in his chair. I watched as the realization dawned on him: he had lost me. I was no longer the woman who would tolerate his mistakes or make excuses for his behavior. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let him take that away from me again. "I'm sorry," he finally murmured, looking defeated. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Your actions have consequences," I said, my heart pounding. "You can't keep running away from them. I hope you find help, but I won't be part of your life anymore. I'm done." There was a heavy silence as we sat across from each other, two people whose lives had once been intertwined, now forever changed by betrayal. I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. I was standing up for myself, finally free from the chains that had bound me to a toxic relationship. As I got up to leave, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was walking away from not just him, but from the life I had once known. The weight of his expectations and manipulations no longer held me back. I was stepping into a new chapter, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. And as I walked out of that coffee shop, I realized I was stronger than I had ever been. I was ready to reclaim my life, my happiness, and my future. As I sit here reflecting on my journey, it's hard to believe how far I've come. Just months ago, I was a woman shattered by betrayal, reeling from the sudden loss of everything I had worked so hard for: my home, my savings, and, most painfully, my sense of self. I felt lost and alone, the weight of my husband's actions crushing my spirit. But here I am today, a testament to the power of resilience and the human spirit. In the days following that heart-wrenching confrontation, I began to piece my life back together. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt and sadness, but I learned to lean on my friends and family who stood by me. They became my pillars of support, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. With their encouragement, I found the strength to face the challenges ahead. One of the most significant lessons I learned was the importance of self-worth. For years, I had allowed my husband's decisions to dictate my happiness. I realized that I had to reclaim my life, to recognize my value outside of our relationship. This journey of self-discovery was liberating. I took up new hobbies, pursued my interests, and invested in myself in ways I had never thought possible. The more I focused on rebuilding my life, the more empowered I felt. As the months went by, I saw the direct consequences of my husband's greed and reckless behavior. While I was moving forward, he seemed to spiral deeper into his troubles. The debts piled up, and the reality of his choices weighed heavily on him. Watching him from a distance, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I had spent so long trying to fix what was broken between us, but now I understood that I could only heal by letting go. The contrast between our paths was stark. While he faced the fallout of his actions, I embraced my newfound confidence and peace. I began to see the world through a different lens, one filled with possibilities and opportunities. I started a new job that I loved, surrounded myself with positive influences, and even began volunteering to help others who had faced similar challenges. Each step I took reinforced my belief that I was capable of creating a fulfilling life, independent of my past. Now, as I look back on my journey, I can hardly recognize the woman I once was. I've transformed from a victim into a survivor, and ultimately, a thriver. I learned that even in the darkest moments, there is always a flicker of hope waiting to be ignited. I learned to trust my instincts and prioritize my happiness. As I close this chapter of my life, I carry with me the knowledge that betrayal does not define us. It's how we rise from the ashes that truly matters. I am stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever life throws my way. My husband may have taken my savings and kicked me out, but in doing so, he inadvertently pushed me toward the path of empowerment. So, to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, remember this: you are not alone, and you are far more resilient than you think. It's never too late to take back your life and build a future filled with hope and happiness. Don't let someone else's choices define your worth. Embrace your journey, learn from your experiences, and rise stronger than ever before. The best is yet to come, and your story is just beginning. If you found strength in this story, make sure to subscribe for more inspiring content. Your voice matters. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do in a similar situation? Let's keep the conversation going, and don't forget to check out our next video for more uplifting stories. Your journey to empowerment starts here.